Okay, let's get started with section 1.1, variables, expressions, and equations. There are a few things you need to make sure you have today before you start watching the video. You need to make sure you have your notes. If you don't have the notes, you can go to my website and print those out. You also need to have a pen or a pencil to write your notes. I don't care which one you use for your notes. And you will also need a highlighter. If you don't have a highlighter, you can make sure you have one for the next video, and you can highlight when you come to school tomorrow. All right, we're going to start out with the definition of a variable. And a variable is just a placeholder for any value. We use it when we have an unknown quantity in math. So anything that we don't know, we will use a variable to represent that quantity. We can go ahead and highlight the word variable because that's one of the definitions that you will need to know. Now, we can use any letter as a variable, but the letter X is the one that is most often used as a variable. So you're going to see any letter. I usually try to stay away from the letter B because it looks a lot like a 6, and that makes it very difficult, but you will use most any letter. But X is the one we'll use most often. Our first key concept then is algebraic expression. And an algebraic expression is just an expression that contains the sum and or product of variables and numbers. You can go ahead and highlight that because we need to know what an algebraic expression is. First of all, you might want to go back and think about what an actual mathematical expression is. And an expression is just something that does not have an equal sign, because when you have an equal sign, that's going to make it an equation. So right now we're just going to work with expressions. Some examples of expressions. We've got some examples. X plus 2 is an example. 5x is an example. 5x plus 2 is an example. And you might note the special notation that we use for multiplication and division in pre-algebra, where we're using variables. For example, in 4h minus 5, we have 4 and h right next to each other, and that means that we're saying 4 times h. Sometimes you will also see, and this will probably be just a little bit later, where we have division, y divided by 3. It's in fraction form, but it actually means y divided by 3. So the bar in the fraction is the division. Our next key concept is to evaluate an algebraic expression. We're going to replace the variable or variables with known values, and then we're going to use the order of operations to evaluate. So that means what we're going to do is come up with an answer. When we replace a variable with a number, we are demonstrating the substitution property of equality. So we can go ahead and highlight evaluate. We need to know what evaluate means, and we can highlight the substitution property of equality. All right, let's look at page 2 of our notes. On page 2, we have some examples of evaluating algebraic expressions. So we're going to evaluate x plus y if x equals 3 and y equals 7. In order to do that, we're going to say x plus y. We're going to substitute 3 for x because we said x equals 3, and 7 for y because y equals 7, and then we'll just add those two together, and when I evaluate that expression, I get the answer 10. In the second example, if a equals 5, b equals 12, and c equals 4, what is 18 minus 3c? Well, once again, we're going to substitute. So we have 18 minus 3 times c, which is 4, and we'll just put it in parentheses out here right next to the 3. We're not going to use the times symbol because if you recall, the variable we most often use is x, and so we don't want to confuse those two. So if you just put them right next to each other like this, that will mean multiplication. So we have 18 minus 12 equals 6. In our next example, we want to know what is 5a minus b minus c. So once again, we'll substitute in. A is 5, b is 12, and c is 4. If we evaluate those, we get 5 times 5 is 25, minus 12 minus 4 is 8, and your answer will be 17. Next, you have 3 practice problems. I want you to pause your video and take just a couple of minutes to evaluate each expression if x equals 7, y equals 3, and z equals 9. And make sure you show your work like I did above to get in the habit of doing that. So pause for just a second and then come back to complete the rest of the lesson. All right, our next key concept we're going to be working on is translating verbal phrases. So we can go ahead and just highlight translate verbal phrases. And step 1 of translating verbal phrases, we're going to define a variable. And you'll need to get in the habit of doing this because we'll do this a lot with word problems as we go through the year. And this just means that we're going to choose a variable and a quantity for the variable to represent. And I'll show you this in just a second with our examples. So that's step 1. Step 2, we're going to translate the phrase into an algebraic expression. And generally, we translate from left to right, just as we do when we read. Unless we have red flag words. So let's highlight red flag words. And right now, our red flag word that we're going to be looking for is the word than. And when we see the word than, it means that we're going to flip the quantities in the expression. So you might see it as less than, fewer than, more than. Maybe others, but these are the ones you're going to see most often. So let's go ahead and highlight our red flag word, and what we do with that when we see it. We're going to flip the quantities in the expression. This should make more sense to you as we go through the examples. All right, so on page 3 of your notes, in the examples, the first example says 8 more than the amount Kiara saved. First thing we're going to do is define our variable. And what we don't know is the amount that Kiara saved. So in order to define our variable, we're going to say x equals the amount Kiara saved. That's our unknown. That's what we don't know. So we'll just call that x. The other thing I notice is that we've got red flag words here, so we can go ahead and just mark that. We'll circle it and put red flag next to it to remind us. And then we've got the word 8. More than, something you've learned in previous classes, means that we're going to add. But rather than it being 8 plus x, remember when we have red flag words, we flip the quantities in the expression, so our answer would actually be x plus 8. As you'll learn later when we talk about properties, that really doesn't make any difference with addition, but we do want to learn the proper way to translate it. The next one is the quotient of a number and 4 minus 5. So what we don't know is a number. So we'll define our variable x equals a number. And then we need to go back and figure out what the rest of it means. Well, we know 4, we know x, and then we have minus 5. And then we have the word quotient. And the word quotient means that we're going to divide these two numbers. Okay? We're going to divide those numbers. But in pre-algebra, we don't use the division symbol. We use the fraction way of showing division like I showed you on page 1 of your notes. So we're going to put x in the numerator, fraction bar, 4 in the denominator, and the first number is always in the numerator, second one is always in the denominator, and then minus 5. And there's your answer. On the last example, we have 3 less than the product of 5 and a number. So we're going to define our variable x equals a number. We have some red flag words, less than, which we know means that we're going to subtract something. The word 3. Then we have the word product, and the word product means we've got 5 and x here. It means that we're going to multiply those two numbers. And remember on page 1, I showed you that to multiply a number and a variable together, we just write them next to each other. So here we have 3 minus 5x, but because of the red flag words, we're going to switch them around. So our answer will be 5x minus 3. Once you've completed your notes, there are some practice problems at the bottom of this page for you to work on. Take a couple of minutes and work on those. And then bring your notes to class with you tomorrow so that we can go through them, make sure that you've completed them, and then we'll work on the homework together.